Broadcasting from the Allen B. Levan NSU Broward Center of Innovation at Nova Southeastern University. Welcome to Sunshine Startups Live, featuring rockstar entrepreneurs, bright ideas, and experts on the startup ecosystem. And now your hosts of Sunshine Startups Live, Jim Ryan and John Wensveen.
Hi, and welcome to Sunshine Startups Live 2024. John, it's season 2. Terribly exciting. The network renewed our contract. So it's terribly exciting to be here once again. I hope everyone's holidays were terrific. We talk about startups and those that foster the ecosystem, successful executives. What a great time to start up the new year, then with a startup with traction. So I'm Jim Ryan, investor, entrepreneur, and startup enthusiast, and welcomed by my good friend, my colleague, John Wensveen. John, great to be with you, and Happy New Year, my friend.
Happy 2024 to you, and it just hit me. I mean, we're in a new year. We're in season 2. Statistically, this normally wouldn't happen to a startup show.
That's right. We beat out 85% of other podcasts, probably.
So it means we're doing something right. We're bringing in the right guests, the right content. So hello to everybody. My name is John Wensveen, the Chief Innovation Officer here at Nova Southeastern University and Executive Director of the Allen B. Levan NSU Broward Center of Innovation, the world's first theme park for entrepreneurs, where we support the founder's journey from birth of an idea through successful exit or global expansion and a whole lot more. And I am so excited to be with you and with today's guests.
It gets better every time you say that, John. And our startup today, Pat Bhava from PikMyKid, this startup and CEO, founder, I saw him in 2016 at the Florida Venture Forum Conference. And I loved him. I loved the startup. At the time, my wife was pregnant, and so we didn't have children. And so, unfortunately, I didn't invest in Pat. I wish I did, now with kids.
It's never too late, I'm sure.
With 2 children, we're never too late.
Never
right?
too
I'm sure
late.
Pat will pitch everyone for this. So,
Or to have more kids.
I'd have more kids, that's right. So, Pat, thank you so much for taking the time to talk about PikMyKid, your company, your successful startup. We're going to talk about your background as a serial entrepreneur. So we kind of bifurcate this, and I'd like to hear about, because you've got a tremendous, American success story coming from India. You, perhaps your family. So kind of walk us a few minutes about your background, coming into the United States, starting a business and getting some traction. So share with us the mini bio of Pat, and then we'll talk more about PikMyKid.
Sure, thank you. And really, excited to be here and talk entrepreneurship. I can do this whole day long. It really excites me. So before we get into that, let's just get the backgrounds away. So my name is Pat Bhava. I was a fighter pilot in the Indian Navy. One of the few people who are simultaneously qualified to fly a fighter and deep sea diver simultaneously. So it was exciting. I spent about 12 years in the Navy, been there, done that. And then, but my family, most of my family was here in the US. So it was getting increasingly difficult every year to travel back and forth, and ultimately something had to give. So my wife was in the US, and I put in my papers for premature retirement, a very tough decision. Moved out of the US, joined my family in 2006, just before the financial crisis was about to take hold. I had my option was pretty straightforward, middle of the line. I'd just done my MBA, so I wanted to do either management consultancy or get into flying. So I got my commercial license, and here right down the street from me in St. Pete Clearwater Airport. And I was all set to join a major airline. And then I asked myself, do I want to do this for the rest of my life? Because I had a little stint in a commercial airline. And boy, after flying fighters, it's boring as hell.
John, you can relate to that.
Oh, can I? Yeah, we have so much in common, from airplanes to scuba tanks, and we'll have to talk.
Yeah. So, and then I decided to not join anybody or fly, and then at those times, I decided to open a food truck long before it was cool to have a food truck. Before Food Network, it used to be called Roach Coaches those days. But I was incredibly lucky that the concept really took off. We starting with from one food truck, we went to 12 locations all across Tampa Bay. We had partnered with Aramark and Baker Health. We have every one of the cafeterias. We franchised the concept and got a decent exit in 2013. I also simultaneously started another managed services business. Again, I sold that in 2014. And as I sold both my businesses, I told my wife I just want to take a few months off and not do anything, right? At that time, US Soccer World Cup was in Brazil. So I took a few months off traveling with the US soccer team in Brazil. I come back after a couple of months. My wife was like sitting in the couch, Netflix. My wife was like, the least you can do is go pick up your daughter from school. You're done with your vacation. I've never really gone to my daughter's school to pick her up because I was all busy and my wife used to take care of most of that. I got in my car, put Netflix on pause, and I was like, how bad could this be? So I show up in my daughter's school, absolute chaos, like hundreds of cars and kids running around, everything going helter-skelter. And there was my business idea after something really bad happened at that day.
Now, Pat, talk about that, because I saw a clip of you. You were on the news in Tampa, where the school actually, if I understand, you placed someone else's child in your car.
So what happened was I was on the phone that day, not paying attention. And after about 30 minutes of wait, I go to the head of the line. The teacher looks at me, opens the door, put a kid in my car, waves me away. And as I was pulling out, I turned around to ask my daughter how her day was. And to my shock, I found this white kid sitting in the back of my car asking me, like, why are you stopping? My dad sent you, right? Let's go. I'm like, no, get the hell out of here. Go find my daughter. So at that time, it was a little bit of a heart-stopping moment. My instant reaction was to blame everybody, blame the teachers, blame the school. Like, how can you make this, how can it happen? And how long has this been happening? Have you put my daughter in somebody else's car? So the instant, that knee-jerk reaction turned into a more thoughtful approach to the problem. And I got talking with the principal, and I realized, we're putting, we're a nation of 150,000 schools, and we're putting kids in cars every day during the prime time of the work week. We have millions of parents waiting in call line, wasting productive time trying to pick up their kids. And all this is managed by clipboards and walkie-talkies and screaming parents and irate teachers. And it's doing nobody no favors, right? So, and there was no system in place, and it just blew my mind. Like, why is there not a process? And that was my genesis to finding PikMyKid and helping my daughter's school. It just started as a small project to help my daughter's school, which just blossomed into something much bigger than what I'd anticipated.
So a little piece of trivia going back to aviation. I don't know if you're aware of this, but the very first scheduled airline route network in the world was the Tampa-St. Petersburg airboat line.
Commercial airline route.
Yes, correct. And I just have to ask you before I ask you the next question, what was your call sign?
So if the conversation has started, hey, why you called Pat? Because I see your official name is Saravana Bhava, then I would have started there. But my call sign was Pat. And there's a story behind that, as with every call sign. We can get into that later, but yeah, my call sign was Pat.
Not as thrilling as Iceman or Thunder, but still pretty cool.
Well, I had one that's sort of cool, but not. And there's a long story behind that. Mine was Air Bear. Longer history there. But what I love about your story, and I know we laugh about the mistake that happened. And I mean, it's not a laughing matter, but it is at the same time. But what I love about really good entrepreneurs is they don't start a business for the purpose of starting a business. It's because they've identified a challenge that needs a strategic solution that can scale and be sustainable and successful over time. And it sounds like you've been able to do that. So can we take a little bit of a deeper dive into exactly what it is? What is your product or your service that you've actually created? So we know the chaos around the schools, trying to make a more seamless, accelerated pathway with success at the end of the day, and safety is a component of it. But what is it exactly that you've created?
Yeah, so today, the way PikMyKid is today, it is the most comprehensive school safety solution, which is 100% cloud driven with zero dependencies of any hardware, which we can get up and running in any school across the world in less than 24 hours. Having said that, what we do in schools is from the moment a child is dropped off at the school till the time they're safely back home, the entire chain of custody at school and anything to do with emergency or daily operations can be managed on the PikMyKid platform. So what, the way we thought about it was, when that incident happened in our daughter's school, we realized that school safety is dependent on the zip code in which every school is there, because it's very expensive and it's very dependent on the discretionary dollars that they have to expend on hardening the school and buying all these high expensive hardware infrastructure, right? And because of that cost barrier and the high hardware dependency, school safety was not omnipresent. And there are little cracks throughout the day, which are filled in by throwing teachers at the problem or the principal at the problem or their magic wand, which is walkie-talkie at the problem. Right, everything can be solved with a walkie-talkie. That's what you ask a teacher; they hold it like a magic wand. But we don't give them the right tools. We don't give them the right way to manage the daily process and the emergency process should a need arise. And so what happens is safety and the daily management takes a backseat, or your learning takes a backseat, depending on which is priority for the day, right? So what we took it on ourselves is to democratize school safety by making it really inexpensive so it can be accessible to every school in the country. And I think we deserve to do that for our kids, to make sure that when you send your kid off to school, you're confident and you have, we as parents can be rest assured that the schools have the technology and the tools to keep our children safe. And that was our mission. We took it to heart and learning from my personal experience, and we live in that mission every single day.
Pat, you've had tremendous success. Obviously, been around for I mentioned about 7-8 years or so, and but you've got some rounds of venture capital. Obviously, talk about your scale right now. So you went through several rounds for venture capital. One of them is our friends from Deep Work Capital in Orlando, and then talk about how many schools are in the system today. What does your adoption look like?
Sure. So it has been a journey, and like you said, starting with Florida Venture Forum, which was one of the first forums where we pitched. I didn't know this whole startup ecosystem at that point. Even the startup ecosystem in Tampa, in Florida in general, was a little nascent. So now we have come to a whole different place. And talking of Deep Work Capital, they were a fan fund at that time. They have been with us from the get-go. They were the first formal round, which came in after the friends and family round, after the angel round. And they came in our Series A in 2016, and they have been a great supporter of us all through. Since then, we've raised another round. We raised the Series B from a growth equity firm in Silicon Valley in 2021. So we've had 2 rounds of funding. In total, we've raised about $10 million so far. So we've been pretty, conservative compared to the startup ecosystem in general. We've been very old school mindset that we need to make every dollar count and not get high on the vanity metrics of how much money you raise, but how much really focusing on the outcomes, right? So, and that's why I tell everybody, you need just a handful of investors. If you can keep them happy, they will keep investing in your company right through your life cycle. And that's what we've stayed true to that. And so, in terms of scale, when we started in 2015 was our first school year. We started with 6 schools that year. We were growing, more than 100% year over year thereafter. So we are right now in about 6,000 schools nationwide, all 50 states, and we are in about 7 countries outside the US. We have over 2 million daily active users. We have a large parent user base. We have a team of about 60 people. Half of them are based here in Florida, rest half, across the country here, as well as we have some remote employees internationally as well.
So I got 2 parts to my question. The first is really just a piece of information. So we have a company that's actually scaling out of the Levant Center of Innovation that created a piece of technology as a result of a mass school shooting that happened here in South Florida. And to my amazement, I did not know that when first responders go to a mass casualty event, that the first responders don't have the ability to talk to each other. The platforms don't communicate from the walkie-talkies, as you mentioned, to even computers, to emergency response vehicles, and therefore you can't go to the target at an accelerated pace, and therefore you can't get to the victims at an accelerated pace, and therefore you have death as a result. And it was a very scary statistic that I heard. And he's created basically a geofencing technology. I'm simplifying it, but it allows all the first responders to come together. And I just think that more and more things need to be done, like what you're doing, Pat, to provide the safety aspect of protecting students across the nation and throughout the world. What I'd like to do is deviate a little bit. You talk about your success in terms of securing funding, and it's a very interesting model that you have. And I also like the guidance and advice that if you keep the investor happy, is sort of the gift that keeps on coming back. When you look at the state of Florida, there's a great debate that's been going on recently, especially since post-COVID situation, that Florida may be undercapitalized. The investor dollars aren't here. The deal flow isn't here. We're not quite there yet. We're still building an ecosystem. And then when you start to map out the state of Florida from Tampa to Daytona and that I-4 corridor, or from Jacksonville to Orlando to Miami, there's a lot of things that are now beginning to connect, and it's not as siloed as it used to be. I'm really curious about what your perception and experience is, and what I'm saying. Is that correct? Is it debatable? Is it not correct? I'd really love to hear what your thoughts are.
Yeah. So there is a little nuance to that numbers which you just said, right? So yes, a lot of formal investment dollars are announced out of California and out of VCs based in California and investing in companies out of in the West Coast. But if you actually slice that, bulk of the LPs of those investment of the firms, the LPs are in Florida. So thinking of it like the money is not there in Florida is a wrong way, because bulk of the money, the family funds, the more wealthy individuals, they are based in Florida. They are right here, but the ecosystem does not exist to channel that money into meaningful companies packaged in the right manner in which they can consume and actually invest in. But that is changing right now, right? With the whole ecosystem, the startup ecosystem in Tampa, in Florida, in Orlando, in Miami, right? It's changed in the last 10 years. So it's, with all these local firms coming in. In fact, a lot of Silicon Valley firms are now having their branches in Miami and in the I-4 corridor, right? So that is giving all the wealthy individuals who normally would have invested as LPs in funds based in Silicon Valley are now looking nearshore, looking at like, hey, that I can get the same diligence done here. I have the same pool of awesome companies based right here in my backyard. And I can also, I can talk to the founders and I can see them in person, shake a hand and invest in companies I feel good about. So it's changing. Yes, that was the perception quite some time ago, but I think it's rapidly changing the landscape.
And Pat, you talked about fundraising before, and obviously you've had quite the success with a number of different rounds so far, and then talking to a number of venture capitalists. you mentioned about Fan Fund, now obviously now Deep Work Capital. Share with startups that are listening today that are contemplating, and this is always an issue, thought-provoking for a lot of founders, that they're deciding between bootstrapping and then fundraising. You obviously did that, the fundraising portion. Why did you decide to go that route? And then any nuggets of wisdom that you can pass along to maybe some startups that are listening today with that.
Yeah, no, it's an absolutely great question, which the answer I learned over 15 years of starting up 4 different companies in the Tampa Bay area, right? My first 3 companies were 100% bootstrapped with zero capital from outside. It was a great business model, and we were cash flowing from one location to my second location. The growth was entirely funded by internal cash flows. While that's a great model, it lets you sleep at night, and you won't grow unless you make the money, right? But what happened is it is at the cost of scale. I had to put up with anemic growth, which otherwise, with external capital, I could have accelerated that to a whole different level in my first couple of businesses. But that was a conscious choice because I didn't have the network at that time. I didn't establish credibility with my background. The banks called me a thin file. So I couldn't get any formal capital as well because my credit history was, I just landed in the States. So I was traditional businesses, and nobody funds traditional business unless you're a sexy startup, right? So I did that with internal cash flow. I learned a ton, and I learned what not to do as well. And I asked myself as I started PikMyKid, do I go the same route of, internal cash flow, bootstrap, scale very slowly, or raise money, right? So and the answer is twofold. I think till the time you can find a product market fit and it's going to scale, I decided to use internal cash flow to get the MVP up and running, get the first idea that this is going to scale. And then I went to the investors, so I get a better multiple, get better valuation. I mean, I could have done it from the get-go, but what happens is you're losing a lot of equity if your business becomes successful, and you lose nothing if you fail. So nobody wins. So looking at it from that perspective, if you're uber confident of being successful, and if you're putting every thoughtful moment of your living life into making a business successful, then you owe it to take on the least dilution possible while ensuring survivability, if that makes sense.
It does.
It makes perfect sense. I had that exact conversation with one of our entrepreneurs yesterday who's been successful to actually make it to the home shopping network with her own segment. She sold 150,000 products the other night at 11 o'clock in the evening. She ran out of inventory, and now she needs injection. Now she has to go to the outside to get that cash to be able to do it. So, here's another question for you. I like to throw what I call the Rubik's Cube. That's why I got one here on the table here. It's a new addition to our 2024 season. And I try to stump people where I possibly can. And one of the questions I have for you is, if you can listen to a lot of podcasts and webcasts like ours, and you can go to conferences, and we often hear about all the successes of what made somebody a great entrepreneur, but we don't hear enough about what the failures were and how you learn from those failures. If you take the biggest failure that you experienced as an entrepreneur anywhere in your founder's journey, what is the biggest thing that you learned from it that you would relay in terms of advice to our audience? And we have a very diverse audience, from I want to be an entrepreneur to I already am, to people like yourself that are already very successful.
Yeah. So one of the failures, so in PikMyKid per se, we've had a bunch of failures, and we learned from that. But zooming out, understanding with your caveat that there's a bunch of entrepreneurs with various backgrounds. So I would go more life failures, so to speak, right? Or at least what I really prioritize. above everything else is we don't talk about this enough. Is that the people are always the most important resource in building anything. You pick the wrong people or you pick the right people. It's a difference between a death knell and really successful scaling your company. And I would say, and I have a funny story in going back to the Navy of some examples which I talked in my TED talk and everything. But I don't know how much time we have. But really whittling it down to finding the right people, and then not just finding the right people, but doing right by your people every single time, right? And when the downturn happened in our company, kudos to the rest of the team on PikMyKid at that time. At every stage, voluntarily they used to come in and like, hey, cut my pay to zero. So or burn is a problem. We'll just solve the problem overnight. So all the top level and everybody used to offer to take zero salary. But at the same time, that is not the end of the story. It is up to us as leaders. How do you give back to those people who have that mindset, right? And that really speaks to how much are you willing to go the other way to make sure you are loyal to your people. You hold their hand when they are down, the way they were willing to give up their salary for you when you were down, right? So I always say this, people are the most important ingredient in every business. We can talk technology, we can talk AI, we can talk about fundraising, but if you don't have the right people around you, I think everything is useless. And yeah.
I like what he's saying too, because given the aviation background, I think it was Richard Branson that really was the first big celebrity in the world, if you will, to go out and say that the number one asset isn't your customer, it is your people. And I've always concluded that if you have the right people, the right plan, and the right money, that you can be really successful. So, Jim, I failed. I did not stump him with my Rubik's Cube.
You solved it right away. Well, I was going to share a dad joke since his business is about, parents and children that, as a former diver and pilot, now he's CEO, he's familiar with the ups and downs. So thank you, Pat. And then for allowing me to do a dad joke for the new year, I wanted to ask you, obviously venture capital has helped pumped in some dollars into your business. You're meeting with them on either a quarterly basis or so. They're probably looking at you and you're contemplating as you're the strategic visionary of the business, what's next for PikMyKid? You're stepped in, working with a number of schools internationally now, solving this sort of logistics pickup. What are there anecdotal or ancillary services that are coming up for PikMyKid that you and the team and the VC partner that you're working with? What's on deck for 2024 and beyond?
So, and before we hit the 2024 and beyond aspect, today where PikMyKid is, even though we started with solving the dismissals problem, today we are the most comprehensive school safety solution. What that means is everything. If the daily operation, which is attendance, digital hall pass, emergency contact, communication to parents. And then if emergency happens, the panic button, the emergency alarm system, in liaising with the 911 local responders, emergency responders, and then emergency reunification. When actually the emergency occurs, how do you reunite parents with kids? And the entire spectrum of emergency communication. The whole spectrum is what PikMyKid does today. So that was a conscious effort like 5 years ago when we solved the dismissal problem. We said, who do we want to be when we grow up? Like, is this all we do? Is this all we're going to be? And we said, talking to a lot of customers, what really came out is that they're buying us. Yes, they're buying to solve the dismissal, but the intrinsic problem they're trying to solve is safety. They care about safety. They care about kids. They want to make sure they use technology to make sure the kids are safe. And then we asked ourselves, what more can we do to really address that gap, right? And that's where all these product features came out. So today we have about half a dozen modules. So we are a safety platform, even though we're we from a branding perspective, we've been told a lot that we need to change our name because Pick My Kid sounds synonymous with picking kid, and that's it, and nothing more. But our customers know us better, and they know that it is a school safety solution. For example, you just brought up that another company in your ecosystem is solving that school the emergency coordination between schools and emergency responders. That is one of the critical components in our product as well, right? There are standalone solutions which do that, but why schools are increasingly moving to Pick My Kid is because they don't want their parents or their teachers to go to a third party or an alien platform when an emergency strikes. In the fog of war, that's another thing they need to care about. They need to worry about. They don't know where the checklists are. So everything is integrated in a platform which they use every single day. So it makes it much more easier for them. So speculating where we want to be in the next 2, 3, 5 years, we today we are partnering with some major companies who want the capability into their ecosystem. So we are scaling rapidly. So we want to be, and we barely scratched the surface. With our product, we are in less than 1% of the schools today, because it's such a sunrise sector and it's such a novel product. No RFP exists to mimic what we provide to schools. So the bureaucracy is not caught on yet, right? So we think we are really ahead of the curve. There's a lot left to be done. There's a lot of green space, which is emblematic by, I don't know if you read the book, Crossing the Chasm. When you're in such a unique market position wherein there's a lot of green space and you just start a product and you show efficacy, copycats jump in. So we are in the era when we have copycats come in like, dozen a month, and they will die away eventually because it takes a lot of work and diligence and customer support to make sure you stay at it. But speculating forward, we want to be the leader in providing cloud-based school safety solutions to not just public and charter school, private and charter schools, but to public schools, because that's where your efficacy and your being nimble and affordable really counts.
And Pat, obviously, with startups that are out there today listening to you, passed on some great wisdom for the start of the new year. Very much appreciate that. How do potential partners or schools or what have you get a hold of you, and what's the website of the company?
Sure, it's PikMyKid.com. It's simple, but the pick is with a twist because it's not PICK, it's PIK. Let me see. Here it is. PikMykid. PikMyKid.com. And if you want to reach me, I am Pat, P-A-T, at PikMyKid.com. So happy to, I talk to a lot of startups and happy to provide any help or assistance I can, because, I think it takes a village. It took a village to get us to where we are today. And I owe every ounce of growth that PikMyKid has seen to the ecosystem we have here in the Tampa Bay area and in the Florida system, right? So I'm happy and waiting to give back to anybody who wants to reach out and solve a problem or ask a question. I'm happy to.
So we always like to have a little fun on the show as we come to the end. So number one, I applaud you for everything you're doing and keep up with the great success you're having an impact and change in the world. As a former naval aviator, do you still feel the need for speed? And what do you do now since you can't fly the jets?
Yeah. So what I did was, I have my license and I sometimes fly, but a few years ago, I bought a paramotor. and started flying on weekends, but a couple of advisors and like, hey, we don't want you to die yet. So
that's an insurance policy issue, that one. Yeah.
So
no, jokes apart, there are a bunch of stuff. I love getting on the water. Make do with a little lesser speed, but that's okay.
Well, terrific. Air Bear, right?
Air Bear
to Pat, sign off. And then thank you so much for being on the podcast. Great way to start the new year, Pat. Bhava, CEO, founder of PikMyKid, extraordinary entrepreneur, has done quite well. Thank you so much for passing along some wonderful insights into starting your company, And thank you for all the work you do within the state of Florida. Very much appreciate it.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. Thanks for the opportunity. Really enjoyed the conversation.
Thank you. Wheels up.
Bye-bye. Happy landings.
Remember to subscribe, like, and share the Sunshine Startups Live podcast and follow us on social media. If you're interested in sponsoring or appearing on the show, please email us at booking@sunshinestartups.live.